All right, good morning, everybody. Yay, excited to be here. Welcome to Beyond Pink. On behalf of everyone at the Justice for Girls team staff, executive director Ann Muno, and program director Tristan Eddy, the JFG board, the JFG community, we welcome you to the 8th annual Beyond Pink Summit, centering mental health and well-being for girls. Yay! Give yourself a hand for being here. Alrighty, hello. My name is Amara. I use she, they pronouns, and I will be one of your MCs for the morning session. I'm a youth program and training specialist for the Girls Advocacy and Impact Network, or GAIN, run through JFG. And a few things about me is that I was born in Seattle, Washington. I'm currently a student at UC Berkeley in California. I'm here right now, so yeah, California. And I'm studying ethnic studies, gender women studies, and data science. Um, I've always been interested in social justice and community work and advocacy. So being here just extra special to my heart, and being part of JFD has been such a pleasure for the past 4 and hopefully, and yes, definitely more years. I'll pass it. Oh, and now we just want to do a few introductions since you all get to know me a little bit. We're going to do some chat introductions. And so please feel free to put the following information in the chat: your name, your pronouns, if you'd like to, your title or organization, the location you're tuning in from, and also your favorite home cooked meal. Again, we just want to know who's occupying this virtual space and yeah, get to know a little bit more about y'all. Wow, so many people here today. Got a lot of folks from Washington, as expected. Ooh, I'm seeing a lot of good comfort foods for sure. I always go to like a soup or something, something very, very good to warm my soul. Oh yeah, I'm seeing, yeah, gumbo, soup, mac and cheese. The list is going on. So many good options. I'll add these to my fall recipe book. Okay. All right, thank you everyone. Continue to introduce yourself in the chat so we can get acquainted with one another. And we're just gonna go ahead and get started with a land acknowledgement. Since we are hosting this meeting in Seattle, Washington, we want to acknowledge gratitude that we are on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, a people that continued to honor and bring light to their ancient heritage. Washington's colonial history and theft of land and suppression of cultural ways are the fundamental causes of disparities in wealth and health witnessed in Indigenous communities here and across the US today. According to the Native Governance Center, it is important to go beyond land acknowledgement and take time to consider actions we can take moving forward to support Indigenous people and nations. Here on the slide, you'll see a link to the center's guide for going beyond land acknowledgements and creating specific actions that support Indigenous people and nations. Also, feel free to type into the chat which native land you occupy. And to learn which native land you live on, please visit native-land.ca. If you are living on Duwamish land, we want to remind you that you can contribute to Real Rent Duwamish at realrentduwamish.org. Here you can learn more about the Duwamish people and pay rent for occupying their ancestral land. And now I'll pass it to my co-host, Jaya, to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. It's so awesome to see you all here virtually. My name is Jaya. I use she, her pronouns. I'm originally from Seattle as well and went to Garfield High School with Amara, and that's when I started working for Justice for Girls. Now I'm a senior at Occidental College in Los Angeles. Actually, this semester right now, I'm in Argentina studying abroad. So it's a little bit later in the day for me, but I couldn't miss Beyond Pink because it really is one of my favorite days of the year and such an awesome time to be in community with all of you. So super excited to be here today. And I am going to go over some of our Zoom logistics and tech assistance. I'm sure you all are pretty familiar with some of this stuff, but we'll go over it quickly. Please just make sure you mute your mics while the presentations are going on. Feel free to share your video. We love to see your faces. This session is being recorded and parts of it may be shared on YouTube so that you're aware. Also, if you'd like, you can change your name by clicking participants and the rename button. You can put your name, your pronouns, your organization, or any information you'd like to share there. If you have any technical difficulties, you can private chat Tristan Eddy, who will be working on tech support. And you can also react to any comments or questions using the little reactions button in the bottom right. So use any emojis to affirm, uplift, second, agree. I see some of you doing that already. And then also we're super pleased to announce that closed captioning is available this year. It is auto-generated, so it might not be perfect all the time, but you can enable it by clicking the closed caption button on the menu bar at the bottom. And let us know if you have any issues with that. And also just, please provide self-care and take breaks as you need it throughout our session today. And then this is an overview of our agenda for today. So we are going to start with a welcome from our board, and then we'll have our keynote speaker. We'll do a couple program spotlights, and then we're going to be breaking for a couple of hours over lunch and reconvening again for the afternoon session at 1 p.m. So we hope you'll join us for as much of the programming as we have planned for today, but please feel free to leave and rejoin as your schedule allows. It's the same Zoom link that will be active for the duration of the event. Great. And then at Justice for Girls events and trainings and any programming we do, we like to establish a set of community norms and agreements about how we're going to interact in our space. And so here are some that we always use. The first is I statements. So when we're sharing, please be sure to speak from your own personal experiences and not speak on behalf of others. Listen, which is very basic but necessary skill to use throughout this event. We want to make sure to actively listen so we can all learn more from each other and be present in the space together. The third is confidentiality. So what's said here stays here, especially if it's a personal detail, personal story, but what's learned here leaves here. So obviously we want you to take the skills and knowledge that you learn out into your communities. The next one is acknowledge your privilege. So this means recognizing the ways in which you might be privileged or the power that you might hold in a certain space. If youth are sharing, for example, on our youth panel, just kind of recognizing that youth often have different experiences and different power in spaces where adults are also present. And then step up, step back. This is very related, but we want to make sure we're all kind of monitoring our space and how much we're sharing so we can ensure everyone who wants to share can. And we also want to give people who usually don't get these spaces a chance to share. So if you notice you've shared a lot, step back. And if you notice that you haven't shared much, try to step up and challenge yourself. And then finally, I love this one. It's literacy check or lit check. We want to make sure this event is as accessible as possible, which includes language accessibility. So anytime you're unsure of the meaning of a word or phrase or anything like that, you can type into the chat lit check or literacy check and then the word, and we'll try to explain it in context or just kind of clarify what we're talking about. All right. I know that was a lot all at once. Now Tristan's launching a poll. And if these all sound good, please answer the poll to agree to the norms. Or if you have anything that you'd like to add, I'd love to hear any suggestions in the chat box. So far, I'm seeing a lot of yeses, which is awesome. Feel free to, add any suggestions or comments or questions in the chat. Awesome. All right, and just one other thing is I wanted to give a brief trigger warning. So please be aware that we will be speaking about sensitive topics today related to violence, sexual violence, and mental health issues, to name a few. So please take care of yourself and feel free to take a break whenever you need to or leave the session. And also at the end of the presentation, we will be providing a list of resources and we'll also send that via email. So if you'd like to have any follow-up on any of these topics or discussions, we hope to provide you with some resources that can help with that. And I'm going to pass it back to Amara to do a little grounding exercise for us.
Thank you, Jaya, for getting us situated in this space a little more. And just to kind of fully center ourselves in the space, I wanted to guide you all through a quick breathing exercise. So this will just take a couple minutes, but we're really just taking a minute to pause and checking in with ourselves. So please go ahead and adjust to a comfortable position. Personally, I like to put my feet like flat on the floor, or just make your body comfortable. Allow yourself to rest. And I want you all to breathe in deeply and bring awareness to what you're feeling, sensing, or thinking. Feel free to close your eyes if it feels safe for you to do, and really focus on your breath. Take the deepest breaths of the day so far, breathing in and out. As you breathe in and out, expand your awareness outward to your surroundings. Take note of how your body is feeling. Feel your breath go through your body. And after 3 big breaths, start to come back to your body. Wiggle your toes, your fingers, stretch your neck out, stretch your back out, stretch your shoulders out. Gently open your eyes if you have them closed. And take a few more deep breaths. And when you're ready, fully come back to the space and feel free to enter into the chat box how you feel now versus how you felt when we started, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, how this exercise went for you. Much better, relaxed, centered. I agree. I agree. I personally feel a lot more relaxed, um, grounded, and ready to receive. I love these responses. Thank you all for participating in that exercise with me, for doing that collectively. I feel like that's very important, for us to just kind of be comfortable in our space, and also, as people have said, just feel grounded and more centered. Continue to type in the chat how you feel. Yeah. And also, in the light of themes for today's conference and the importance of providing self-care, we encourage you to engage in this interactive online puzzle if you need a moment to de-stress throughout the day. I know folks who have joined Beyond Pink in the past have loved this activity. And the cool thing about this is that all of Beyond Pink attendees can collaboratively work on this puzzle and by visiting the links below. And a couple things to note, just to keep in mind that this website does require a lot of bandwidth, so your computer might slow down a little bit. And the puzzle website unfortunately changed to only allow for 10 people to access the puzzle at one point in time. So if one of the links isn't working, please try the other listed links. And yeah, there should be an open puzzle for you to fill out throughout the day. Can't wait to see the results. I know we've had some pretty fast puzzles being filled out. So yeah, again, feel free to use that as a way to take a break as well. And now we'd like to talk a little bit about the people who registered for the event. Historically, Beyond Pink has been a day of convening growth serving advocates and youth professionals from across Washington to train in person. In response to the pandemic, we joined with countless other organizations in pivoting to a digital conference model. Even though we are sad we won't be able to see you in person this year, we're full of gratitude that this online format has reduced barriers to attendance, for so many people who wouldn't have been able to attend otherwise. We have folks registered today who care about youth from over 100 schools and organizations who provide youth development, mental health, nonprofit services, child welfare, housing, juvenile court, juvenile rehabilitation, and higher education. We dedicate space today to elevating racial and gender justice for more than 817,000 girls under 18 in Washington state and nearly 20 million girls under 18 who collectively live in California, Georgia, Hawaii, Idaho, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New York, North Carolina, Ohio, Oregon, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Texas, Virginia, Washington state, and Washington, D.C. When was I going to end? Who knows? We're serving so many people, folks. And we also just want to shout out that we have folks who live in 69 cities and 16 states represented. And again, 104 different systems. And as I mentioned earlier, more than 817,000 girls under 18 in Washington state and nearly 20 million girls under 18 are collectively represented. Just want to emphasize that. That is amazing. So thank you so much for being here. And I will pass it back to Jaya.
Wow, that's really incredible, the scope of this event. Thanks, Samara. Now we're going to share a little bit of the context about how Beyond Pink, Justice for Girls Statewide Summit, got its name. So over a decade ago, we named the event Beyond Pink because we wanted to challenge the idea that slapping a little pink paint on the wall of a detention center or bringing comfy pink pillows to an after-school center meant that you get high marks for centering the needs of girls. So today's summit, Centering Mental Health and Well-Being for Girls and Gender Expansive Youth, provides a rare and vitally important opportunity to explore innovative ways to help engage and mobilize community members in work that's girl-centered and racially equitable. Also, improvements in our programs and systems, so they're organized to strengthen how we engage girls as change makers in our communities. And finally, impacts that community advocates are having to shift social norms to offer more culturally responsive and gender-affirming mental and behavioral health supports. Our incredible keynote speaker, youth speakers, and trainer will provide fresh ideas for how to engage communities and girls in driving solutions to social change and how to work with girls in a way that strengthens the inherent power that they possess. We hope that you take away inspiration and practical ways to engage and support colleagues. And we hope that by hearing and seeing what's new, that you leave with a desire and commitment to join the efforts of our coalition and our partners as we continue to grow. And now we would like to introduce you to our incredible Justice for Girls board member, Sammy Alizadeh, to tell us a little bit more about our organization and mission. Sammy is a senior deputy prosecuting attorney with the King County Prosecutor's Office. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Sammy.
Thank you, Jaya. And I think that was our backup in case I couldn't make it this morning, but we made things happen. So you get me in real life, which is very exciting. I am so excited to be here. I want to welcome all of you into this virtual space. We are at Beyond Pink 8. Can you believe it? For those of you who've been here from day one, it's been 8 years. Like, this is our eighth Beyond Pink. And as Jaya mentioned, my name is Sammy Alizadeh. I use she, her pronouns, and I am so incredibly honored to be here today as a Justice for Girls Coalition board member. I also come into this space as a first-generation Iranian American woman, a sister, an attorney, a wife, and a mother to a very curious and amazing 2-year-old daughter. She and all our future generations of girls are the power behind my why, and who inspire me both professionally, in my professional capacity, as well as my role as a community member and showing up into these spaces. Joining as a Beyond Pink participant and JFG community member is something we want to celebrate, not only today, but in the ways that we each show up in our individual lives. It's our shared values of caring deeply about the next generation, our shared goals of furthering girl-centered practices and racial equity in all spaces and systems. These values and opportunities to connect like today are truly a beacon of light and hope during what can feel like a really difficult time in our world. So thank you. Thank you all for taking the time today and joining and building our JFG community to learn more about how we can make real, sustainable, and impactful differences in not only serving and empowering girls, but also elevating their voices at every table to guarantee this meaningful change that we so need. Before we get into the fun training and collaborating portions of today, I do want to take a little bit of time for some of our new attendees to talk a little bit more about the work of Justice for Girls and how we got to this space. We're a statewide advocacy model program and training nonprofit. The coalition's work and much of the work of today's summit is centering on the mental health and overall wellness and needs of girls who are marginalized by discrimination, poverty, violence, systemic racism, and a male bias punishment system. Now you might be thinking, okay, Sammy, but can we actually make those changes? Can we really make a difference? We can. And what does that really mean for girls in Washington State when we center on their needs in such a holistic way? Well, while we still have a lot of work to do, and all of you amazing, brilliant minds in this space are going to get us there, I do want to reflect a little bit on some of the progress we have made by making sure that we're focusing on girls and their needs in such a holistic way. It means helping pass legislation to have mandatory comprehensive sexual education. Consent is super sexy, y'all. It means safe harbor laws that further decriminalize and protect victims of commercial sexual exploitation. This allows and honestly forces the system to focus on the buyers and the people that are actually doing the harm versus the victims of CSEC. It means ensuring period products are available to girls across Washington State so they're not missing school because they can't afford to purchase these necessary items. It means supporting legislation and destigmatizing mental health in our schools and providing the necessary resources to our educational systems to make sure that there's enough counselors in those school buildings to address the needs of our young people. It also means providing girl-centered race equity practices in trainings like today at Beyond Pink and providing local budgetary policy advocacy trainings. It means community organizing while using a public health model across all systems to create, again, that much needed systemic change to respond to those holistic needs of our girls. And it means providing girl advocacy programming and teaching girls skills to testify in the legislature and speak up about issues that they care about and that directly impact them. That youth voice is so incredibly valuable. Centering our system's change on girls and organizing as community to support girls is at the heart of why this coalition formed roughly a decade ago. Back then, a small group of advocates, academics, court administrators across the state were asked to go to testify in Olympia on trends in the treatment of girls, specifically in the juvenile justice system. And a powerful takeaway they had after their testimony was that the trends were really unclear and the data just wasn't there. And that they knew that a great deal of collaborative work was needed. That's why the coalition formed. That's why we're here today at Beyond Pink 8 all these years later. It was simply a group of statewide volunteers trying to spark change and make a difference. In the years since forming, we've learned that across our state, efforts to create more effective programs and practices that are responsive to girls' needs are growing. But as we all know too well, that funding to elevate and scale these efforts is frequently unavailable, and let's be real, inaccessible to everybody. We also know that girls' pathways to the juvenile justice system often originate from surviving abuse, especially sexual violence. We know how racialized, gender-based pathways impact girls in different ways. Some pathways result in the push out of school, others push them into the child welfare system, and others into the juvenile court system. But what we've learned along the way is that when a girl ends up in a court or in a dual system situation, whether it's civil court, whether it's criminal court, whether there's a dependency, there were multiple other systems in whom she came contact with. Specifically, multiple other networks of support where interventions and the community could have potentially interrupted those traditional systems involvement in the first place. This is where we must increase our resources, our education, and our connections and our collaborations so that we can best support girls early on before they ever enter into a system. And if they do enter that system, make sure that those systems are centered around the needs of girls so that they are better off once they've exited such a system. While we know more now, and we've learned a lot along the way, we're still poised to do and learn more as we continue our efforts in focusing on girl-centered practices. About 5 years ago, with the support of a federal National Girls Innovation Grant, we received our 501c3 status, formed a board, and expanded our scope to include the advocacy and training across multiple systems, including school, mental health, general health, housing, child welfare, and juvenile justice. Now, I know there's several JFG staff, volunteers, and board members here in this virtual space, so I'd love it if they could give a wave, or if their cameras are off, make one of those emoji reactions, which I still don't know how to do, year 3 of a pandemic, just so we can see your faces or see that you're there. Thank y'all. And while I'm acknowledging the fanners of the flame, I want to give a huge heartfelt thank you to the Satterbird Foundation, to Group Health Foundation, to the Washington State Partnership Council, Liberty Hill, and of course, the many, many generous individuals who have supported this work along the way. We could not do this work without you. Thank you. I also want to take a moment to thank Tristan Eddy. Among the many things she does for JFG, she does an amazing job in coordinating Beyond Pink every year. And while we have moved into a virtual space, and some might say, oh, well, we're not setting up chairs, day of or night before, Tristan is working tirelessly to ensure that the tech is working, everyone knows where they need to be. She lines up the most amazing speakers and trainers that you're going to hear more from today. So I just want to give her a shout out to making today possible for all of us. So thank you, Tristan. I hope that you all enjoy your day. I thank you all so much for joining us today at Beyond Pink. Be sure to key in later this afternoon, where you can hear more about some other opportunities to stay engaged over the course of the year, other ways that you can make a difference, and learn a little bit more about some of our other membership programs that we have launched in the last year or two. So I will pass the mic back over to, I believe, Jaya, and I hope you all have an amazing Beyond Pink 8. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you all for the work that you do in the community in meeting the needs of our young people. We could not do this work without you. You are the boots on the ground, and I really hope that you have some amazing takeaways and tangible things to take back into your spaces. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Sammy. I think it's actually Amara's turn, so I'll pass it back to her.
Thank you so much, Sammy, and thank you, Jaya, as well. And yeah, again, thank you so much, Sammy, for providing more context as to why we center girls and gender expansive youth. Very important and extremely key in our work here. And so now I have the great honor of introducing today's keynote speaker, Dr. Camille Quinn. And Dr. Camille Quinn is a health criminologist scholar whose research focuses on investigating the health equity of African American adolescents and young adults at the intersection of race, gender, health, crime, and system involvement. Specifically, as an extension of her vast practice experience, she is identifying and addressing the needs of Black girls and young women involved in the youth punishment system to develop and advance effective and proactive prevention and intervention approaches, as well as practice, policy, and research. Currently, she is the recipient of the National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparities Loan Repayment Program. Also, Dr. Quinn is the co-PI of a MacArthur Foundation Safety and Justice Challenge, which invests in efforts to increase criminal justice reform at the local level. Dr. Quinn's keynote is centered on research presented in her recently co-authored report, Indispensable but Overlooked: Girls' Caretaking and Household Responsibilities and Their Effects on Girls' Lives, published in the Georgetown Law Center on Poverty and Inequality. This research review examines a range of studies and finds that girls' roles at home form a significant but invisible part of the care economy, which has substantial effects on their childhood, especially their experiences in school. Please join me in a warm welcome for Dr. Quinn.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. I am honored to be here at Beyond 8. I'm miffed that I haven't been to Beyond 1 through 7. So I'll be here from now on. But it is my pleasure to join you all today and to have this time to talk about an issue that I think is really important. If you bear with me, I'm going to share my screen so I can pull up my slides. Thank you all for that. The title of my talk is Caretakers Magic or Not, Exploring the Unequal Circumstances for Adolescent Girls' Unpaid Labor in the United States. And so part of what I'm hoping to do here is create a sense of community, even though it's virtual. I love the idea of considering one's privilege. And so in doing that, I wanted to create an inclusive introduction. I love the intro, my bio that was read, but I wanted to share some other more specific things about my background, including my full middle name, which is Renee. I always use R as a middle initial. I am an African-American cisgender woman. I was born in Ypsilanti, Michigan, and I grew up in Chicago, Illinois. I am a member of Generation X, a single woman, daughter, sister, caregiver for my mother, and an associate professor in the Center for Family and Community, Equitable Family and Community Wellbeing in the School of Social Work at the University of Michigan. My pronouns are queen, she, her, and hers. And with that, I am wanting to share with you all a video that I love that really situates the why I use the pronoun queen. So give me one moment while I stop sharing and go to the video. I won't.
Hey, Queen. Hey, Queen. Hey, Queen. Sister.
Girl, you've done it again. You are constantly raising the bar for all of us and doing so flawlessly.
You do know that you're that girl, right?
I hope that when you wake up in the morning and look in the mirror, you see how divine you are.
Know that so many people want what you got.
You have dreams to fulfill and promises to yourself that you must keep. I know at times you feel underappreciated and misvalued. Trust me, we've all been there.
So it's necessary that you can count on yourself.
Now, don't go seeking perfection.
Extend yourself a little grace.
Don't be afraid to celebrate the little wins as much as the big ones.
You, Miss Thang, are courageous. You are dynamic. You are principled.
So baby girl, just remember, respect is a minimum.
There's a sweet justice in knowing that the path you are on was designed for you and you alone.
Doing right by yourself never goes out of style.
Everything about you is majestic and a force to be reckoned with.
Trust me, people are paying attention. You're special and worthy of praise. Don't shy away from it.
And you don't have to get your groove back because guess what? You never lost it.
It's also important to rest. Make sure your hustle doesn't get in the way of your health. Girl, take care of yourself.
And the next time you want to second guess yourself, don't do it.
So pause for a second right now and relax, relate, release.
You are needed, you are appreciated.
Girl, you make me so proud. And I love you.
Remember,
You are 100%
That queen.
oh yes.
Hey, Queen. Hey, Queen.
Hey, queen, sister. You are constantly raising the bar for
You tell them that you're right. I hope that when you wake up in the morning, you see them fine you are. Look at so many people running, but you not. You have rooms. Feeling promises to yourself that you must. Another time.
Sorry, I'm having a little trouble here. There we go. Though I could have played it a second time. All right. I absolutely love this video because it shows the dimensions of who we are as women. And it also personifies what I choose to see as an inclusive way to think about what is a binary term of queen. Because some days I really feel king-like when I'm running the show. And it's not just about gender per se, but I think that the affirmation around being a queen, especially the part that Loretta Devine talked about when she says, don't let your hustle get in the way of your health. You have to take care of yourself. And so thinking about that is really important because part of what I'm going to talk about today in this overview is this report, you know, what we did, what we found, and then what it all means. Last month, two dynamic events occurred on October 10th. One was the Girl Generation Festival, and then the other was World Mental Health Day. On October 11th was International Day of the Girl. So it is fitting that the Justice for Girls Coalition of Washington State would host Beyond Pink 8 that focuses on mental health and well-being of girls. So why should we center girls' mental health and well-being? Well, I think we need to make girls and women's mental health a global priority. And so I'm speaking specifically about women and girls in the United States, but it is a global issue. Girls and women, by and large, carry so many burdens. The pandemic really just showed us that we're even more vulnerable than we ever thought. And many of us aren't even aware that aside from the pandemic, there was a quote unquote shadow pandemic. So the spikes in violence, intimate partner violence, child abuse, all of those things have a direct impact on the health, well-being, and mental health of girls. And lastly, suicide and suicidal behaviors have spiked significantly, especially among Black girls and LGBTQI subpopulations. So it is to our advantage to focus on this area and on this population. So the report, as was noted, indispensable but overlooked girls' caretaking roles in the United States came about as a result of some of my collaboration work with Rebecca Epstein and Talia Gonzalez, as well as law students and interns at the Georgetown Law Center on Poverty and Inequality, Initiative on Gender Justice and Opportunity, and student researchers at The Ohio State University. One of the reasons we really wanted to focus in this area was because the care economy primarily has been considered and contextualized in terms of its impact on adults. Also, caretaking roles have increased even more as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Some individuals have lost loved ones, causing a need to shift household duties and caretaking chores. And so we believe that looking at this from the perspective and understanding it and how it impacts girls was warranted. So what do we do? So the aim of our report was to really bring attention to this issue, especially girls who carry the burden, to center the research and policy efforts to relieve their disproportionate responsibility. Why did we do a scoping review? We felt it was an established method of synthesizing information within emerging areas of research to identify knowledge, gaps, clarify concepts, and to investigate research that has been conducted, as well as identify research that needs to be conducted. The last part is most important from our vantage point, because we noted that there were numerous gaps in the work, which you'll hear a little bit about as I go through the rest of my talk. But we also wanted to confirm what we would determine as relevant information for the inclusion of potential research ideas and future research studies. So how do we do this? We use a comprehensive group of key search terms to ensure identification of all the articles and reports that were meeting the aim of this review. For example, we use terms like adolescents and caregivers, adolescents and family members. One I didn't list was youth caregivers. And that review process using different search engines allowed us to prioritize articles that have been published in peer-reviewed journals in recognition of the scientific rigor and quality of these findings. We also conducted broad and deep searches with flexible inclusion and exclusion criteria. In other words, we wanted to make sure we found the best of what was out there, what had already taken place. We made sure that 2 of our research team members conducted a final review of the findings to identify categories as well as themes. The background here, because you might be wondering, well, how much of an issue is this really? Well, it's estimated that between 1.3 and 1.4 million youth between the ages of 8 and 18 performed caregiving and or household duties in 2005. This is pretty dated. However, the main point with this is to understand that we believe, based on what we've learned about this care economy in adolescence, is that the numbers reported are likely much lower than they really are. We found that it was noted that individuals may not necessarily identify that they have engaged in these topics or engaged in these behaviors, whether it's caretaking, household chores, simply because of the stigma that could be associated with it. It's also been noted that it's much more common for American girls versus boys to engage in unpaid caregiver and household tasks. As a matter of fact, I want to put a comma here, because what we noted also is that when boys engaged in caretaking and or household tasks, they were usually supervised and they also received some form of payment. This is a framework that we use to kind of conceptualize our findings. It's the bioecological model, and we wanted to focus it around what the factors that were related to caregiving and household activities. So you'll see at the bottom are individual factors like race, gender, ethnicity, and age, family factors, gender norms, sociocultural context and structure. And at the community level, we noted findings related to school performance, participation in extracurricular activities, peer contacts, and relationships. So let's talk about what we found. So first, at the individual level, we noted the power of gender. And what do I mean by that? Well, what we noted was that there were gender discrepancies in the performance of household tasks and activities, as well as responsibilities, that truly held constant for girls across ethnicities when compared to boys. And that kind of follows up on the point that I just made with regard to boys having levels of supervision versus girls. It seems that the findings that we secured pretty much indicated that adults trust girls and feel that girls are just naturally more responsible. And so they didn't necessarily require a level of supervision, and that they were trusted and entrusted to take on these responsibilities without question. In addition, families hold gender-based expectations of adolescents, which served as a contributing factor to the persistent evolution of activities that were carried out by girls. So they started younger ages engaging in these activities, but they also continued to engage in these activities as they got older, where we saw different, or the flip side of that with boys. They may be engaged at similar spaces with girls early on, but as they got older, they became more involved in extracurricular activities, et cetera, that required their time outside of the household. We also noted these differences by race and gender. So girls of color tended to be much more engaged in household duties and caretaking activities than not. Specifically, what was of utmost interest to us is that Latina females, there was much more research that had been conducted investigating the caretaking and household duties that they were engaged in. Some of that was done in the guise of wanting to understand the family, or familicilo. What does that look like in a Latinx family versus any other group? So it was that was a bit surprising to see that so much of the work had really been dominated around understanding the impact on Latina girls. And so then we also noted that this focus around the age of girls, younger girls take on household tasks than younger boys, and girls who engage in these tasks at higher rates throughout their childhood and on into their teenage and young adult years. For example, with one study, we noted that there were Latina girls who were in fact taking care of their siblings' children, in addition to earlier on having taken care of their siblings. So very interesting dynamics that were related to these categories of identity. We also found some interesting things at the family level. So parental employment status had a direct impact on what kind of duties that young girls may engage in, depending on what kind of work the parent did. And this is across the board. Some of the studies we reviewed noted that if mothers worked, girls were more likely to take on household chores. But then some studies we also noted that even when moms didn't work, girls versus boys might be engaged in these activities. So we felt that was a bit of a mixed result. Also, we noted that, again, as I mentioned, adults tended to assign traits, these types of activities, to girls just because they're conducive to caretaking, like based on their maturity, their responsibility, and as well as their nurturing characteristics. So this is a factor around adults' discretion. What is the adult's perception of girls and boys? And then in a context related to gender, as I highlighted earlier, what might gender influences take on that the adult will decide, well, I think this is better suited for this young lady versus a young man. There's also this notion of bias, or what we identified as a sociocultural bias of many American families, where it suggests that girls and women are just, quote unquote, more fit for caretaking tasks. We think that is a fascinating finding, especially given where we are at this point in time, where so many women are engaged in the workforce and at high levels of leadership. In the Queen video, you saw all of these women who have such great prominence, yet and still there is this persistent belief and bias around viewing girls and women in a more nurturing, caretaking role. And lastly, we found that major disruptive events had a significant impact on the need for family members to turn to their children for help. And so this is part of the stigma that I referenced earlier on, where when parents are experiencing difficulties or challenges, whether it's health related or income related, whatever it is, that inadvertently puts a burden on the other family members, especially girls who are living in that household. So they're much more likely to have to rely on, or even by default, rely on girls for that support. One of the studies we found that we reviewed noted that the pandemic has had an even more adverse impact on Black girls, and that many of these girls have been engaged in caretaking and household chore duties that have impacted their ability to be successful in many different ways. So we also wanted to talk about what happens in the community. What did we find? And so what we noted was that some of the individuals who were focused in these studies, they live in communities or neighborhoods that are traditionally described as low income. So in that, housing becomes an issue as a default. If for some reason parent, mother, uncle, grandfather, whomever loses their job, their income is at jeopardy, now they're dealing with a situation where they may be displaced in terms of their home and where they live. So this adds an additional burden to girls, which shows up in the classroom. Some girls reportedly had a significant drop in their grades, or they had missed so many days of class because they were performing these tasks in the home that they were marked down in terms of their attendance. So these are things that had cataclysmic impacts on girls. And we noted also that for some girls, particularly Black girls, that they were not necessarily feeling this level of need to disclose the circumstances that they were dealing with personally. So they would just take the detention, or they would take the mark on their attendance or the poor grade, and not necessarily explain to their teacher or to the disciplinarian what is happening at home, because part of that is, again, is stigma. There's this socio-cultural bias with regard to what happens in our home stays in our home, but also there's this need to protect the parents who are the caretakers of them, and they feel that it's important to maintain that level of confidentiality. So we found some other factors as well that were important to note. There's a diminished capacity for socialization. Again, I noted that girls were less likely to engage in extracurricular activities as were boys, simply because they just don't have time. We noted that some girls had a teacher in their school who started a club or an organization, and the girls were excited. They came up with mottos and plans for things, activities that they wanted to engage in, but the girls weren't able to attend. They simply were unable to break away from home to come to engage in these wonderful activities with their peers. So as a result of not being able to do that, they also are lacking in the ability to develop the peer connections that they so desperately want, but also need. To that end, there are a minority of girls who noted a level of resentment for having to engage with their in these duties in the home, and that sometimes resulted in family conflict. Mom or caretaker may say, you know, no, you can't go over your friend's house and study. I need you to clean up the kitchen, or you need to finish these chores, or some of these girls are doing these things and they're not being paid. So they're not being compensated. And that's not to suggest that parents need to take on a financial burden, but there is a discrepancy with regard to some families who would, say, compensate young males for engaging in these tasks around the home, but not necessarily the case for their daughters. There were some studies that noted some benefits. And in no way do I want to underscore that I think that we should be promoting benefits with regard to these activities for young girls. But I do think it's important just to note that some adolescents' experiences with caregiving and household activities facilitated the development of a sense of responsibility, self-agency, efficiency, and competencies. Some people even have likened this to what is called positive outliers or approaches, where young people are able to successfully engage in tasks in spite of those disruptive events that have occurred, like the pandemic, like police violence that took the lives of so many Black young women and men. They've been able to do those things in spite of those things. So it's important to note that. And they also noted that handling these responsibilities could increase young people's maturity, their self-reliance and empathy, as well as improve their self-confidence, self-esteem, and competence, as well as strengthen their connections to family members. So what does all this mean? It's clear that there are unequal practices, and I believe that attention needs to be given to this invisible role that girls play in the United States care economy, that it pretty much has flown under the radar. There was some talk during the height of the pandemic about the impact of women being displaced from work or working from home and the challenge that that presented, because they were also caretaking for their children. But there are also girls who were in those homes or other homes who had to continue to engage in activities, but had higher rates as a result of the pandemic, even if their mother or their caretakers were at home. I think another way to think about some of the unequalness of this issue is that girls of all races and ethnicities assumed a higher proportional share of unpaid work or labor in the home compared to their male peers, with the most significant gap being found among Latina and Black youth. And so research really does need to extend beyond our scoping review findings that also reflects the need to provide a key foundation for another needed development, which is structural reform. So it's not enough to talk to girls about, as Loretta Devine said, taking care of yourself. It's not enough to look at it at the individual level. We need to echo some of the efforts that Sammy talked about in terms of legislative activity, policy change, so that we can see the level of infrastructure that needs to be developed, created, and implemented so that there's an opportunity for girls to reduce the level of housekeeping duties and or caretaking activities that they are involved in, if they so choose. Now, I do want to point out that one of the point that came in one of the studies we found is that some girls identified themselves as contributing to the well-being and the functioning of their home environments because they were playing these roles. However, knowing what we know with regard to the pandemic and the shadow pandemic, we don't need to do anything that is going to provide an opportunity for girls to burn out in any other way. And so being able to think about these nuances of agency and these reform practices, I think, are really key. Just really quickly want to talk about some of the limitations of the work that we conducted. There were a lack of studies on the topic of the invisible care economy, as well as adolescent caregiving. We were surprised that there wasn't much more work in this area, but then we also noted that we identified studies that were extremely narrow in terms of the sample set. So even though the studies were conducted, they didn't necessarily have as representative of samples as would have been how should I say it, that we would have liked to see, or put it like that. And so the resulting of the findings that we have is that they don't necessarily apply to a population outside of the specific confines of each study. So they're not generalizable. And then many studies engaged in analysis, but they did not disaggregate their data by race or gender. They did not focus on system involvement. So we don't know about young people who may be involved with the child welfare or the youth punishment systems or special education. And I think it's important to have that information because those young people are likely to experience more severe challenges and difficulties as a result of this added burden of engaging in caretaking and household duties. And so in conclusion, I want to highlight that adolescent unpaid labor, it can impair their academic success, some aspects of family cohesiveness, and opportunities for socialization and adolescent development that are most acute for girls. And that directly impacts their well-being as well as their mental health. The shame that's associated with unpaid labor is rooted in the structural and systemic inequalities like poverty and as well as racism, and that needs to be normalized, meaning that the shame needs to be obliterated. If we address the structural and systemic inequalities like poverty and racism, there won't be a need for people to feel that we're less than, or we shouldn't talk about our struggles that require us to rely on or depend on our children, because we are all engaging in a communal effort to support each other, and that there are supports at the local, the state, the county, and the federal level to ensure that all families have the support that they need whether they're experiencing these difficulties or these disruptive events, or they are just sustaining the functionality that they have in their homes that they need just to get through day to day. We see that these emerging outcomes appear to have been amplified by the pandemic. So I think that any structural reforms need to consider the impact that not just the pandemic, shadow pandemics, as well as other opportunities to build the contingencies that are needed to support girls in the context of their families, communities, and schools. Future research must address the current gaps in knowledge. Who knows, maybe I can come back to Beyond Pink 10 and give another talk or a training about the new work that's been done, because the opportunity is there. The studies need to include strengths-based analysis to examine protective factors, which often are not the focus. We're not necessarily looking at assets, but we're constantly focusing on risk. And so my hope is that future work we do in this area are going to dig even deeper into understanding girls' strengths, assets, and the factors that allow them to be buffered and bolstered as they move through this dynamic period of adolescence in their lives. A few next steps. I'm not going to touch on all of these, but I think it's important that adults become educated about youth caregiving, especially its impact and effect on girls. And as America grows older, more people are becoming caregivers, not necessarily by choice. So it's important that individuals, that adults really recognize the kind of training and support that they need to support their children. If they work directly with young people and girls, whatever the setting is, that they have the support, the information, the content that they need to be their best tool in working with girls who are engaging in these activities. I think that we also need to recognize that girls in schools or other settings have likely been impacted by these structural and systemic factors, particularly girls who experience what some consider marginalized categories of identity. I mentioned earlier that Black girls and subpopulations of LGBTQI have had increased rates of suicide as well as suicidal behavior. So it behooves us all to be knowledgeable about every aspect of young girls' lives and how we can serve as buffers and protective forces in their lives as they move forward through these different stages. Become an advocate in your community, as most of you are already. Organize events like Beyond Pink 8 to help really reduce and, as I said before, obliterate shame that is associated with youth caregiving and household task duties. That this is not to normalize the need for young girls to engage in this behavior, but more so to normalize the need to have support, to willingly engage and offer support. And then building upon existing events like this one. Other places do back to school events, share care packages, and help connect them with those who have similar experiences. I witnessed a quote unquote period party, and the facilitator said that she made certain that she got donations from people to provide girls at the parties because many girls don't have their toiletry poor. So they don't have the very necessary essential items that they need to engage in the activities of womanhood. So part of what she did was give girls extra items so that if they're ever with a friend or a cousin or a sister who doesn't have those items for themselves, they can share them. And there's no shame in them having to ask. It's like, oh, hey, girl, no problem. Here you go. Those kinds of things. And before I move on to the last slide of acknowledgements, I do just want to offer that the events like this and topics like this should inspire hope in all of us, that there is a path forward, that the next steps that we take can in fact further dismantle the absence of understanding around issues like unpaid labor for youth and how we go about addressing that in the future. So with that, I would love to acknowledge my co-authors and partners. Again, my colleagues who co-authored the report with me, as well as the students that worked on the report, the Initiative on Gender Justice and Opportunity at Georgetown University Law Center, and the Annie Casey Foundation for their generous financial support of this endeavor. And these are my references, and I just want to thank you. There's my contact information, and I will stop sharing.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Quinn. Could we get like a round of applause emojis, some affirmations in the chat? What an amazing presentation that you provided, and just information. You mentioned like inspiring hope, like being present in this moment definitely inspired hope in me personally, and I'm sure that we're all able to take back some best practices to our own organizations and communities. And as you said, like really normalize the need to have support and engage and offer support for girls, especially in the context of like unpaid labor and the care economy. So thank you so much. Feel free to drop in the chat like some of your key takeaways, reflections. Yeah, I can't emphasize enough how grateful I am to have witnessed that presentation. So thank you again. Yeah, and just like speechless. And yeah, we're seeing it in the chat as well. So I think right now we're going to
sorry, Amara.
go
I was
Go
wondering
ahead.
if anybody has any questions for Dr. Quinn. I don't know if you're able to field questions, but if any folks have questions for her, we have a couple minutes. Go for it, Julia.
Hi, everyone. That was incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. I was sitting here thinking, oh man, I wish I could give this to my parents when I was a young, I was a young kid. But I'm also, I moved, my family moved here when I was 10. So we're an immigrant family, and adolescent unpaid labor was just kind of a thing that you did. I had two younger brothers. I was the oldest daughter and only daughter. So I'm like, I'm feeling all of this. But I'm also sitting here wondering, for future research, would you consider talking with adult women who experience adolescent unpaid labor? Because now I'm thinking, how has this affected my relationship with my home, my adult, just work in general, how my inability to say no to people, labor, like all of that. I'm sitting here like, I think I need a session with my therapist now. Thanks, Dr. Queen. But I feel like I need to know more. How has this impacted me? And I'm curious if maybe for future research, you'd consider talking to some of us.
Absolutely. I think that is a fascinating idea that you posed. And it does really speak to several things, but I'll highlight a couple. So first, there's this need to really understand the impact of patriarchy in our society, and it isn't to point the finger at people who don't self-identify as women on any level or girls, but it is to recognize that those sociocultural biases and beliefs, they are typically tended to be handed down from generation to generation. A few summers ago, a young Black queer woman, did a workshop, what she called, my apologies, a master class, and it was fabulous. It was about 8 or 10 women of color who participated across ages. So we're talking about late 20s to maybe early 50s. And one of the topics was about patriarchy. And there was a young woman on in one of the sessions, and she said, I am not wanting to transform into this fabulous, whole, healthy person. And she happened to be a Black woman. So I can marry a Black man that's stuck in the 60s. Because there is a presumption that no matter how accomplished you are, no matter how successful you are, no matter how many heights you reach, that you're still going to take care of the household. You're still going to cook and clean. You're still going to raise the children. And there's a movement, but it's very quiet movement of women who are there, this kind of flipping of the relationship duties where women are working and the men are the ones that are staying home. But oh my gosh, the wrath that some of these men face and women simply because of these choices. So I think your question is a great one. One, it's important to extrapolate our own experiences because we were all girls. Okay. At one point in our lives, we were all girls. And so what does that look like? What did that look like for us? I know people who engaged in, these chores or duties, but they got an allowance, right? And then I knew other people who, as you stated in your question, it was an expectation. This summer I was in Uganda and I was talking to some of the indigenous people there, and someone asked me about this work, and a woman next to me said, "This would never fly here in Kampala because it's expected. This is what we do in terms of pitching in, taking care of the household." And so that kind of aligns with one of the studies that I mentioned, where young girls felt that there was a level of duty to engage in these tasks. So I do think that which is why I try to attenuate my discussion around these findings, because I don't think that it serves our purposes if we demonize or criminalize the activities. But I do think that the difference is that when young girls are expected to or required to engage in these duties, then you are going to see some of the things you talked about. Either the desire for perfectionism, the need to do it all, quote unquote, when you know you can't, or the level of resentment and sadness and depression that may result from engaging these, or just plain old burnout, right? I remember a friend of mine told me a few months ago, she said, girl, my soul is tired. And I had to pause. I said, whoo, that's something else. Because when your soul is tired, that means you have not been attended to in far too long. You are not taking care of yourself or your soul. So I think your question is a great one. And I can't wait to talk to my colleagues about it. And feel free to email me offline with any other thoughts you may have about that, as well as anyone else.
Thank you so much. Do we have time for another question? Gina, it looks like your hand is raised.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everybody. I just learned about this event an hour ago. The conversation is excellent. I just went through this whole lived experience raising 3 daughters of my own and being raised by a single mother. And I get that there is pretty much nothing, anywhere. And there's no conversation about it either. We just kind of fall where it is that we lay. I've always encouraged my girls to find purpose in the work, and I mean, their work is school, right? So I've my girls, the kind of girls tend to take on those roles for sure. Barbies are good for that, and play, imagination. I encourage their friends to find purpose and play to your talents, as far as laying a path to your life. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I don't know, Gina, you're breaking up just a little bit, so I don't know if you had a specific question.
Well, I don't really I have a comment actually, as far as my experience raising my girls in the school. I try to encourage my girls to participate, and even in the mentorship at their schools, and they had their resources available to them, and I encouraged them to participate. And we actually lived a very volunteer lifestyle, I mean, I went around and I had a crew of little girls to do the work. But I ran up against conflict with their teachers in order to accommodate the services that were available to them. I mean, there wasn't anything I could do or say. I held my own private open houses with all of their teachers to try and find answers and support in their mental health, because obviously they're struggling, all 3 of them in their own special way. I've been trying to build a vocabulary around just addressing or talking about their own mental health in a way that we're all comfortable with. My ex-husband and mental illness destroyed my marriage and their family, so it's not something you can actually run away from, especially when they're the financial support, and it's been a lot.
Just want to amplify really quickly what Gina referenced in terms of conflicts with teachers is often rooted in their own burnout. They're likely dealing with some of the same factors that you described. Oftentimes, disciplines or areas or professions that tend to be dominated by women tend not to be supported in the same manners as other fields, other disciplines. So many of the teachers that you may see in schools tend to be self-identified women. and the principals and superintendents are often male. And so there's a disparity there that plays out in the classroom. It plays out in their professional development. And there needs to be a level of education that happens at that primary and secondary level, which is actually one of the reasons why we wanted to do this work, because I have a hunch, a hypothesis that I am scratching to test, which is that at least for some girls of color, particularly Black girls, if these young women are engaging in duties in the home that in essence require them to function like women, like adults, it is difficult for them to make that shift when they go to school. So if they're at home and they're making sure, and they're doing what they're told, because they're being told, you make sure that your siblings get to school on time. Now, they didn't necessarily say how, they just said, you make sure that your siblings get to school on time. So they do. That may mean they end up not getting into class because they may get there too late. So they're either going to get in detention or maybe even suspension, or they just don't go. So let's look at the girls who may end up going, right? They're sitting in class, their neighbor, their classmate is talking. Hey, stop talking. And then the teacher tells them, hey, stop telling them what to do. That's not your job. And she is feeling like she's helping maintain decorum in the classroom by telling the student not to talk. But the teacher may not see that in the spirit of leadership. They may see that in the spirit of defiance or non-compliance, or what you're describing in these, engendering these behaviors that are related to self-agency that aren't defined that way in their curriculum. So what ends up happening is those behaviors are left to the discretion, again, the discretion of the adult. And so whoever that adult is, they will make the decision about how to interpret and respond to that behavior. And I have a hunch that for Black girls who are in those circumstances, they're much more likely to be referred to the school resource officer and or get arrested and involved in the youth punishment system. Now, I don't have data to support that, but I'm feverishly working on figuring it out. But I even think for the circumstances that you're talking about, Gina, where you're wanting to raise girls who are engaged and connected and they are volunteer minded, that those behaviors, depending on the setting, depending on the teacher, could be welcomed or not. And so as their parent, part of our, and other adults who care about these girls, some of what we have to do is help them with the white space on the page and be able to say to them, hey, you know, that works here, but it may not work there. Hey, I do that with my doctoral students all the time. It's like, hey, let me tell you about Dr. Na. That may not fly. Oh, hey, let me tell you about such and such and so-and-so. That may not work. Let's do some adjustments. So it may be that having the opportunity to engage them in that manner and talk to them about the fact that some people they just not gonna be jazzed about you. You know, they just not. And focus on the ones that are. Focus on the ones that are giving you the vibe, that are giving you the love. That's what you want them to do in that way, because that will help them to maintain their sense of wholeness as a person, and that they're not internalizing the harm that other people are in, whether it's intentional or not, but that they may receive.
Thank you so much, Dr. Quinn. That's really incredible. I want to make space for our last question before we move on. Sabrina, are you able to ask?
Hi, yes, my name is Sabrina Schmuller. Dr. Quinn, thank you so much for your research and your work on this. And I was thinking about a sociology term called the second shift, which is used to describe how women come home and they do more work outside of their job. And a critique that a lot of sociologists, feminists who have is that, well, Black and brown people have been doing the second shift for generations. This second shift is really racialized. And I think a lot of what is missing also is, when including these conversations about women, the part about adolescent teen girls is missing. And so, research is really, really important to inform policy work, to inform how we do work in the community, to how we can inform allies who do work. How can we really not necessarily label this, but understand this to expand this at a policy level if there is no research? And second to that, how can we elevate these voices in spaces where decisions are being made on behalf of children and people doing work, household work, especially Latinx, Latina, and Black children and youth.
Yeah, it's a fabulous question. I could do a whole talk to give you a response. But what I will say to you is that there are several things that can be done. Having events like this is one, maintaining the focus on this issue. And it's tough because there are a lot of issues, right? There are a lot of priorities. So we have to kind of figure out what is our bandwidth? What do we want to focus on? And then when you decide, like if we say, well, this is the area that we really need to focus on, because your point around the sociological focus around the second shift, it's true. But I think we have to think about this historically, right? So in a course that I teach, I always hearken back to the history. When this country was founded, it was founded by who? Founding fathers, not mothers, fathers. So women were not included. As a matter of fact, women were property, chattel, okay? And then people of color were not people. They were 3/5. And then you had indigenous and other populations of people due to genocide and the colonization and et cetera, that dictated how they were maligned, eradicated some. And that is the history we live with. So part of what we have to do is not just recognize that history, but then decide, how do we move forward collectively together in ways that acknowledge all people's pain, but also the hope that we all represent? Because the universe needs all of us. The universe needs us all. It needs all of our talents, all of our efforts, and all of our ideas in order to tackle something like this. There's some very specific things that you can do in terms of advocacy, engaging representatives. I've done that. I've given expert testimony in the state of Ohio regarding the abolishment of laws that work to the sheer disadvantage of young people, like life without parole, mandatory reviews for individuals who are on life without parole, that the governor DeWine signed that into law in 2021. So there are things, just as Sammy just got through talking about, so there are very tactical, concrete things that we can do and continue to make noise about the issues that matter to you most.
Thank you so much, Dr. Quinn. And that's a great point to bring up. And we're actually in our advocacy group, we're working on our legislative platform right now that will highlight policies that will support, girls in our state. And we draw inspiration from incredible legislation that's passed in other states as well. So thank you so much. In just a couple of minutes, we are going to take a break, but I want to just reiterate how incredibly grateful we are for your time and for your expertise and for your insight. And if we can get some emojis going and love in this room for Dr. Quinn, thank you so much. I need to hear you speak every day because it is just incredibly powerful. I need that video, the Queen video. I've been getting a lot of like direct messages too. Folks are feeling the love and feeling really hopeful. And so thank you so, so much. Very, very much. We really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you. Well, we're going to take a quick 5-minute break, so folks can grab some water, maybe check in on the puzzle, but don't go away. You can stay logged in because we will come back and have 2 really incredible program spotlights that are also going to uplift you, make you feel really excited, and talk about some awesome work that's being done here in Washington State. So don't go away. We'll see you in 5 minutes now. If you're on the West Coast, we'll reconvene right around 10:40. All right. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. If you can start coming back from your break, turning those cameras back on if you'd like. We'll get started again. Awesome. As people trickle back, I just want to say thank you so much again. That was an awesome presentation by Dr. Quinn, and I know I learned a lot and felt super grateful to be able to participate in that part of our day today. And now I am going to introduce one of our program spotlights today, Maddie Sandoval. Maddie is the co-executive director of FIRE, which stands for Foundation for Youth Resiliency and Engagement. And it's my honor to welcome her here today. So please join me in welcoming Maddie.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's great to be with you this morning. I am going to share my screen real quick and tell you about our organization. All right. Oops. Okay, can everyone see that? Like a thumbs up? Perfect. So, like they said, we are the Foundation for Youth Resiliency and Engagement. That is such a mouthful, so we just call ourselves FIRE. And a quick overview about what we do. So we're a youth-serving 501c3. We work with young people ages 12 to 24. We're located in the very rural and super conservative Okanogan County, which is actually Washington State's largest county by landmass. We opened our doors in October 2020, so kind of in the height of COVID, and we experienced massive growth in a really short amount of time. So when we opened, it was myself and 1 part-time employee. In just over a year, we grew to about 20 staff members. This fluctuates a little bit with our youth internships. So we take on a lot of young people and train them and then try and get them into sustainable career pathways. In the time that we've been open, we've worked with approximately 800 unique youth across our entire county, which means we have some young people that travel over an hour one way to get to us, because there are no other services like us. Our youth are, they are just not getting what they need. And so we're happy to be here and try and fill that gap and grow and support young people across our county. We are a BIPOC-led organization. The majority of our staff were raised locally. So when people ask, like, what is the key to growing big quickly? I would say hiring people who lived here and grew up, because there wasn't that steep learning curve where you're trying to figure out the landscape of where you're at, what the needs are. Like, we've lived it, we've survived it. We're watching our kids or our siblings go through it right now. And it's really easy to dive in and just get going. And we also hire a lot of young people in our organization, and that's actually my favorite part. And so that helps guide the success of our organization, what's needed, how we want to do intakes, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. Pictures over here in this top right corner are Youth Leadership Council through a sex sexual health trivia night, which was pretty saucy for our area. And we actually had like 57 young people turn out for that. It was a huge success. And we just kind of went over consent and all the things you would get in like comprehensive sexual health education. So grateful that that bill passed. Doesn't necessarily mean that our schools are rolling it out. And so we know that that's not true for our young people, not all of them. And down here, we attended a lot of our young people's graduations. And so this is a picture of our staff with some of our young people that we're very proud of. Our mission is that Fire advocates for equitable opportunities that allow all youth to thrive. And our vision is an Okanagan County where the opportunity for healthy minds, bodies, and homes exists for all young people. And the 3 pillars of our work include prevention, intervention, and a lot of systems change, because we are just one person and we know that there needs to be big shifts in all these different systems so that we're working for our young people and listening to them and being responsive to their needs. So how do we do that at Fire? We offer a full continuum of care in-house. So that means we have a youth supply closet, which is actually a pretty big room that we set up like a thrift shop. So you can get all new hygiene products, socks and underwear, and then gently used clothing. We help with transportation. So Fire will go and pick up and drop off young people. We provide bus passes for our very limited public transportation system here. We help young people navigate a lot of systems like DSHS, food bank, getting on health insurance, WIC. We also help get connections to healthcare. So we do a lot of sexual health. Okanagan County has one of the highest teen pregnancy rates in the state. And that is a big social determinant of health, of other things that can come up in their lifetime. And so we like to make sure that they have access to free and confidential sexual health care. We also tackle education and employment. So we do GED testing here. We do tutoring, driver's ed, a lot of job exploration, youth internships. We get young people over to Job Corps. Last month, I think 2 of our employees drove a young person to Oregon. It's like a 14-hour car ride to drop them off at Job Corps, and they're doing really excellent right now. We do housing. So there's a huge housing crisis in our community, like there is everywhere, but even more so for our young people. So we do not have homeless shelters here, certainly not for young people. You can't check young people into motel rooms. And so we're in a really tricky spot. But we do our best to do referrals, and actually Fire received some funding from the state to start building our first youth housing project, like an independent living learning center that we're working on right now. So that's big things. And then some systems navigation, again, that's like DCYF, juvenile justice system is a big one. So helping them understand their pleas, going to court with them, doing some advocacy there. And then we have this whole other branch too, which is our mountain recreation space. And so this is just an after school hangout space. This is where we do the tutoring and GED support, but we also have things like free food. We throw different event nights like karaoke nights, which are a pretty big hit, sexual health nights. We offer a lot of different resiliency programming. So we do like traditional Tuesdays, which is Native American beading classes, Wellbriety, which is quite similar to AA or NA, but rooted in Native American traditions. Cleo, one of our activities coordinators, did a Pride support group that we're working on rolling out, which is pretty exciting. And then throughout the summer, also just trying to get all these experiences that we know aren't super accessible to our young people and making them accessible. So that included a lot of paddle boarding groups, outdoor yoga, Adulting 101 series, so learning about cooking and how to buy a car and understanding credit and opening a bank account. So we do all these things, and our building is split in half a little bit. So one half is direct services, where you can walk in and say, like, I need help with food and housing and healthcare, like right now, and we will get you set up with an advocate. And that tends to be like more of our 18 to 24-year-olds. And what we learned is that it was really challenging to engage like our 12 to 17-year-olds in some meaningful work and like having them ask for help, because that's really scary and there's a lot of shame around it, and especially when you're young. And so we're like, you know what, we'll catch you in the rec center. So that is a really low barrier way to come hang out with us, get to meet us. We have super fun staff on that side that are youthful and make really meaningful connections with those young people. And through that, We then can move them over to the other side if they need, or introduce them to some services that they might not know about. And this has been a really successful strategy for us. We also do a lot of youth leadership council, like development things. So previously to starting FIRE, I worked at a nonprofit where we ran a youth leadership council, and luckily, like, FIRE got to take that over in collaboration with that nonprofit, Room One, and we still run that, but that's a peer educator group. They do a lot of work around healthy relationships, accessing healthcare. I know I keep bringing that up, and I guess a big piece of information is we don't have like a Planned Parenthood here or a family planning, and the nearest abortion services are over 3 hours away from us. And so it is really challenging to get those basic needs met. These young people also go on retreats. We've taken them to Lobby Day before. They give presentations to school boards and legislative work groups. It's a really incredible group of young people. FIRE has a youth advisory council, which is kind of on pause right now, but was so critical to the start of FIRE. And this was our group of young people who just told us how we're doing it and what it's going to look like. And so they reviewed our outreach materials. They code switched for us, and they're like, no one wants to answer that. Nobody knows what that means. Like, we need to switch this up. We presented like what we thought good ideas for programming were, and they just told us like how to elevate that, how to pitch it. Like, yes, this is needed. No, this is less needed. Or maybe we need all these things, but you need to prioritize this first. And it's not always intuitive on what order those things should go. So we're incredibly grateful to that group of young people. This is a picture of them in here, and they were in FIRE when we were still like pretty scrappy. So we had like orange shag carpet, like partially knocked down walls. We didn't have running water, but they stuck through it with us. It's now a really beautiful building. That's finished, and so that's exciting. And then we also have a youth oversight board in collaboration with OSPI, and so reviewing state school policies, mostly around preventing sexual violence in middle school. And a really important part of this is paying young people for their time. So if we ask young people for their thoughts and opinions and wisdom, we always compensate them for that time. And we try and tell them, like, you are so valuable, like your voice matters and it carries weight, and you should be compensated for that. So all these young people get about $50 per meeting that they attend. Some other things we do are like a pride event. And so actually in our community, I think FIRE was the first organization to do any pride event in Okanogan County. On the conservative side, we had like this little pocket in Twisp, which is a completely different landscape. So it looks a little different there. So we got this like 8-foot flag above our building that you can see here. These are some of our buttons and posters. The first year we did Pride in the Park, there was quite a bit of pushback. We got our window smashed and some really hurtful voicemails, but we still had about 150 people turn out. And then this past June was our second annual Pride in the Park, and that grew exponentially. And so we had about 350 community members that showed up and way less pushback. And we had more organizations who were willing to make a statement about how they're going to openly support LGBTQ youth. In the first year, that was not true for us. So we didn't really have partners there with booths or things like that, because to get in, like for you to be here, we had to ensure you're actually safe for our young people. A quote from a young person was, they came to FIRE for the first time after we put the flag up, and they said, I just wanted to know what it feels like to be somewhere without homophobia. I didn't know things like this existed in our community. So it's a big way that we draw in young people. And let's see. So just why we open FIRE in general, to catch young people in their formative years, to break the ongoing cycles of poverty and abuse through prevention, intervention, and diversion efforts. So Michelle and I, who are co-founders and co-directors, worked in our respective areas of youth work previously, and we were just watching so many young people fall through the cracks, and that was really challenging. And there was nowhere to take them during COVID either. So like I had some young people that had been sex trafficked. and I had nowhere to meet with them. We had nowhere safe to go. And so we were trying to meet in public and socially distant. But we had people following us, like scary people following us. And there was some inaction from law enforcement and juvenile justice. And it was so hard. And so we knew, like, we need to find a space right now where we can catch these young people who are just fallen off the edge in the height of COVID. And then we also wanted to ensure that all young people feel supported and like they have people in their corner. So FIRE is a little bit of a family over here, and we show up however young people need that. And so we like to go to sport events, academics, like graduations, if they have personal accomplishments or things that they're proud of, plays, like we go to those. I've sat in on some school parent-teacher conferences for young people before. Like, we just want them to know, like, we love you, we believe in you, and we're here and we're watching. And so we really try and elevate them and support them in that way. And lastly, to insert ourselves in larger systems change conversations. So that is challenging, being young, being brown, and working with the population that we do. It was really challenging to get an invite to the table. So it actually looked like us kind of like wedging our arms in there, like, hey, like, we need to be in these conversations. I promise we have things of value to say. And like, you need to understand rural communities. You need to understand BIPOC youth. You need to understand what our LGBTQ youth are going through. And we knew we needed like an organization backing and some money behind it to really confidently enter these conversations. And so we've had the privilege of presenting in little conferences like this. That's like a statewide thing. We do local and regional talks, a lot of advocacy. And so that's a core piece of our work too, to make bigger changes, lasting changes. Yes. And then just to reiterate our vision, what we're working towards is an Okanagan County where the opportunities for healthy minds, bodies, homes, and communities exist for all young people, which is not currently the case, but we're getting there. And that's like the quick overview. I could really talk about FIRE for like an hour or more because there's so many different intersections of our work and ways to view it, and just a lot of happenings over here. I would encourage you to check out like our Facebook page, follow us on Instagram to kind of see what the different activities are looking like that we're doing. Hayden, one of our young people who works for us, is actually on this call and is beefing up our TikTok right now, which is pretty funny. So check that out. And then if anybody has questions, if you do youth work, how to get youth leadership councils going, things like that, even curious about our funding streams, or if you're in a rural community, we always love sharing information and offering support. And so you are more than welcome to email me, and I put it down here. Tristan can also forward my information to you if you need it. But yeah, so that's my quick overview of FIRE. Thank you so much for the opportunity and for listening. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maddie. Let's everybody give a big round of applause or an emoji reaction for that awesome presentation. I know I was super inspired just to hear about, despite being in this district or this region where you guys were seeing a lot of vacuums in terms of these types of services, you were able to provide such a comprehensive set of support systems for these youth, and that BIPOC youth really are leaders within your organization. I know that, yeah, I would love to pick your brain more about all of the awesome work you do. And I hope everybody here does reach out to you with that contact information, because I think, yeah, I was just super inspired by that presentation. So thank you so much. And just to keep us moving along in our agenda, now we have a super special presentation. I'd like to introduce Julia Kagochi and Nathan Fowler, who will spotlight a Justice for Girls training that has been years in the making. Really exciting. So welcome, Julia and Nathan.
Thanks, Jaya, and thank you, Maddie, for sharing all of that. That is incredible work that you're doing. So hello, folks. My name is Julia Kagochi. I'm a Tacoma-based anti-racism consultant, but I'm also the One Girl Better Systems lead for Pierce County. So a few years ago, Justice for Girls had this vision to really elevate girls and gender-expansive youth by equipping the adults, us in their community, with the knowledge, the skills, the compassion needed to really fully support these young people. So One Girl Better Systems, or OGBS, came alive through the work of advisory committee members, community leaders, and so many young people who wanted to share their stories. And through that work, we've been developing a girl-centered, racial equity-focused training, and I'm super excited that you get to take a peek of it today. Nathan, our instructional designer, has been extraordinarily incredible and patient and creative in putting all of this vision to reality. So here he is now to share more. Nathan?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited about this project. It's been really fun to work on. Yeah, I just wanted to, we're still kind of very much in development right now, so I didn't want to get too much into specifics about the content, but I wanted to give you some glimpses of what we're working on, just to kind of start to get people as excited as we are about working on it. So so I've got a few slides, just screenshots from some of the content. The first one I wanted to share is just kind of, this is the basic course outline. So I think when we started, one of the challenges was that there was just so much great content and so much that we could potentially put into this learning experience. And I think one of the first kind of challenges was coming up with an organizational structure that's going to be meaningful for the learner, and not seem too overwhelming. So we did a lot of work on kind of getting a structure that we were happy with. And so this is just kind of a glimpse of the course outline, which kind of shows how the course is going to go. And I'll just kind of walk through it a little bit. It starts with just kind of a brief introduction about the e-learning, kind of the aims and goals, then gets into the first of kind of 4 parts. The first one is really kind of it's kind of focusing on the why, like why focus on girls and gender expansive youth? What are the impacts of trauma and implicit bias? Giving kind of a cohesive framework for the work that's done. And then from there, moving into the part 2, which is really scenario based. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the scenario a couple slides later. So I'm just going to kind of gloss over that for now and then go back to it. And then part 3 really gets into girl-centered community practices, using examples, including a lot of different resources. And then at the end of it, we kind of get a pretty cohesive wrap up, and then a chance for the learner to kind of test their knowledge, understand what they've, because it is a lot of information. So a chance to kind of interact with some of the content, review it, see how they've kind of absorbed it. And then the end is really kind of an appendix where it's going to be hopefully a very helpful compilation of a lot of different resources for the state and for the community. And that could be anything from like handouts or links to websites, different House bills and policies that you can read more about, really a chance to kind of expand the learning beyond the confines of the e-learning itself. So that's kind of the structure of the course. And the next slide, let's see. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the content itself, because I think with any kind of e-learning, especially with a lot of content, it can start to feel overwhelming. And we want to be really careful not to kind of overwhelm people with large blocks of text. So I've been doing a lot of work to try and take the text we have and insert engaging visuals, infographics, things that illustrate some of the points being made, but also use, break out the text so it doesn't feel overwhelming. I want this to be a very fun and enjoyable experience as well to go through this material. And so a lot of it is like text. It can be something simple like text features, infographics, like I said, or even small things to keep the learner engaged. Like we have things called like flip cards where they they get a piece of information on one side and then they have to click it to get a little bit more context or more information. These might sound like small things, but they're actually really great for the learner experience in terms of keeping them engaged and not just feeling like they're reading, a whole bunch of content. So those are just a couple of quick glimpses of the content. One of the sections on implicit bias, and the other section is from Why Focus on Girls, some statistics about Washington State. So then I wanted to talk a little bit about the scenario activity on the next slide. Now, I've been focused on working on this scenario activity for the last few days, and I've been really excited about how it's shaping up. Now, the first thing we wanted to be really careful about is not to think that we're coming up with like a comprehensive experience, like this scenario is going to speak to everybody's experience. So right up front, we really say like, this is not a single person we're talking about. It's somewhat of a composite of a lot of different stories, a lot of different narratives. But I still think that bringing all those together and having it be kind of a single focus adds this kind of human element that draws out a lot of the points we're trying to make. And I think that's really helpful. Scenario learning, in my opinion, is just extremely helpful in terms of solidifying some of the knowledge. And so the way that we've kind of worked a lot on this activity in particular, in terms of kind of how we want it framed. And so how this one works is that we have a kind of a person named Simone, and she, like I said before, she's kind of a composite of a lot of different real life experiences, but we have broken out into a few different parts, kind of aspects of her story. And along the way, and you can see here on the screen, her story is kind of told in these very brief slides that people kind of click through. And what they do, the learner will kind of read a little bit about her story, and then they'll move on to see kind of specific points within her story that are places where somebody could have intervened, perhaps to like maybe put a more positive trajectory, or resources they could have offered. If you want to jump to the next slide, I'll show you a little bit more what I mean about that. So what we've done here is kind of tied specific like sentences from the scenario itself. I drew those out in these, you can see it's kind of these rectangular boxes with actual pieces from the scenario. And when they click that plus sign, the learner gets more resources and more context about questions they could have asked at this point in her narrative, or resources they could have explored or offered. And some of them have inline links that allow you to even look at certain web pages or different resources at that time. But, in order to kind of keep the learner on a forward path, we've also kind of framed that all these resources will be available at the end of the training too, if they'd rather just kind of work through the training itself. But this scenario kind of continues down that path where you get a little bit of her story, then you're kind of breaking out that story into little places and being encouraged to pause and think a little bit about where she's at and what can be done to help or change her trajectory. So that's the scenario activity. And then the scenario, we're still really working on part 3, I would say right now. That's part 3 is the kind of introduction to girl-centered community practices. But what our goal is there as well is to continue to draw from this story and this scenario to just continue to kind of solidify some of these points and offer more resources as the e-learning continues. So the next slide, I wanted to just talk a little bit about interactive learning as well. I've kind of touched on this before earlier on, but we want to make sure that the learner is engaged throughout. And so in a lot of ways, that can just be simple ways to click to get more information, or a video to watch, changing things up so it's not just text or it's not just audio. It's a lot of different modalities that people use throughout, so that a lot of different types of learning styles are kind of implemented. The screenshot on the left is this is in the section about trauma, and it's just talking about the different parts of the brain. And then the learner is, able to kind of roll over the actual graphic of the brain and learn like what the different parts are and how they respond. And then the screenshot on the right is just, again, this part isn't quite as well developed yet, but this is going to be kind of the comprehensive appendix at the end that's going to be filled with a lot of different resources for either viewing or downloading. And that is really, for me anyway, an important part of interactive learning, is that the boundaries of it stretch beyond the e-learning itself and connect you to all these great resources that are already there as well. So we want, we have learning objectives that we want the learner to work through, but then we want to just open it up to a wide world of resources and be able to have a single place where somebody can find those things and download them as, in a PDF form so that they have it as a reference. So that's coming. We're still working on that part, but it's a part I'm really excited about that I think is going to be really important. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is just on the next slide is just one of the great benefits in my mind of any kind of e-learning experience is that it is self-paced. People can kind of pick at it in small doses if they'd like, or if they prefer, they can take it all at one time. But that being said, like we want to build in ways to kind of encourage people to break up their learning, take a little break, walk around. When you're not in a classroom, you lose that kind of human element of like, oh, let's get up and stretch our legs. And so we're going to try and build that into the e-learning experience to kind of encourage people to go at their own pace, take it a little slower if they needed to. And we've also talked about putting in some videos at the end of each part, little like breathing exercises or things to kind of ground people. So that is just right now, that's kind of where we're at right now with the e-learning. It's really exciting. And I've been really enjoying this experience and watching this kind of the organization of a lot of the content kind of coming together into a really great, engaging learning experience. And we're hoping that sometime early next year, we will have it ready to show everybody. So thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. And thanks to Tristan, Julia, and Anne for working with me on this. It's been so much fun to work as a team on the content. And I think the next slide, we also have just kind of a thank you for, somebody else might be able to speak to this better, but just so many people have already weighed in on a lot of the content, given us really valuable feedback along the way. And you can see, there's a huge list already, and it's continuing to grow too, as we're continuing to develop it. So.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nathan, and thank you, Julia. And yeah, thank you to all of these incredible service providers who have provided countless hours of feedback and guidance to make this training even better. JFG is so appreciative of our community, and we can't wait to share this program with you very soon. And we'll be sending the launch dates and details as soon as we have them. But for now, does anyone have any questions for Nathan or for Julia about this program? You can put them in the chat or raise your hand. No? Well, we can let them trickle in, or you guys can reach out separately. I know for me, it's really awesome. I've had to do quite a few like online trainings for college and things like that. And it's really nice to see ones that are scenario based, that are interactive, that are user friendly, that incorporate those things like breaks, and just really how thoughtful you all are being about, making it engaging and valuable. All right, so we'll go ahead and move on. We're almost finished with our morning session, but we just want to share a couple of announcements before we break. These are 2 exciting opportunities that you can participate in to stay engaged with our work. So the first is by joining our JFG paid membership. This membership is made available to anyone who's interested in our work, not limited to people who work in the industry. And joining as a member means showing support for JFG's advocacy that continues to build muscle to positively shape policies that help girls who are marginalized by discrimination, poverty, violence, and a male-biased punishment system. We also know services for girls are chronically underfunded, and we want to work to change that through our advocacy at the coalition. So here are some high-level details about becoming a member. The cost for an individual membership is $150 a year. And this membership includes exclusive e-newsletters containing content such as Washington State data on girls, legislative updates, community awareness campaigns, and ways to become involved in advocacy, just to name a few. It also includes a 10% discount on all summits and trainings like Beyond Pink or other trainings we have, and admission to any Justice for Girls member events. So we really encourage the membership. It's an awesome way to get access to all this great content and to support our work. And the second opportunity is to join our advocacy membership. So this group is for girl serving professionals in Washington State specifically. And joining the membership involves attending 1-hour monthly virtual meetings to collectively find effective ways to address the issues and opportunities for change that Justice for Girls has surfaced in the research we've done and the data we've collected. So in these advocacy meetings, our members use a girl-centered and racial equity lens to build state-level legislation recommendations that Justice for Girls can champion moving forward. So it helps build out that policy platform and those goals based on all the expertise that we get from our community advocacy members. So if you or anyone you know would like to join the paid membership, you can click the link that Tristan's sending in the chat. Or if you'd like to join our advocacy membership, please email Tristan at teddy@jfgcoalition.org. We'll also send sign-up information in the email that Tristan will send after Beyond Pink, so don't worry if you missed any of that. But yeah, really encourage you all to look at those opportunities. And next, before we break, we'd like to take a moment to uplift the Hilltop Artist Program and promote their winter glass sale. Hilltop Artists is a youth development arts nonprofit in Tacoma. I'm sure many of you are familiar. I know they do awesome work. They operate deeply impactful programs, and they've been doing that since 1994 with broad community support and a track record of huge success. So you can support the youth that are in the Hilltop program by stopping by the Gymnasium Gallery at Hilltop Heritage Middle School on Saturday, December 3rd from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. and purchase some beautiful hand-blown glass pieces, which you can see in these pictures. So yeah, more information can be found online using the link that Tristan's putting in the chat right now, but super encourage you guys to attend the glass sale, or if you can't, just check out all the awesome work that Hilltop is doing. And I'm going to pass it back to Amara to close us out.
All right, everyone. So now we will break for lunch. Thank you, Jaya. And we will reconvene back at 1 p.m. Pacific time. This afternoon session is not to be missed. There will be a program spotlight on an innovative mental health initiative, a mental health panel of youth for our Girls Advocacy Program, and our training will be provided by Lauren Carson, the founder and executive director of Black Girls Smile Incorporated. So this session will focus on ways parents, service providers, and families can support the mental health of African American female youth. And specifically, participants will learn about the unique experiences and risk factors that impact the mental health and well-being of African American female youth, highlighting the increasing suicide rates, primary and secondary outcome statistics. So we really hope that you are able to join us. And in the meantime, we invite you to step away from your computer and go out for a walk, eat some food, maybe play the online puzzle with the fellow Beyond Pink attendees if you wish. So yeah, this is your time to break. We will see everyone back at 1 p.m. Pacific time. And thank you again for joining our morning session.